the Russia Sanctions EU Exit Amendment Number 4 Regulations 2024.
Right. Morning, everyone. I call the Chair to move the motion. The Minister to move the motion, not the Chair. Minister. I might do it differently.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Mr. Betts, and it's such a pleasure to serve in this debate representing the government. And I think I can say genuinely that many of my happiest hours in opposition were spent in committee rooms like this, talking about SIs and delegated legislation with the government. As one of my honourable friends just said, well, now may be the time for karma. We will see. But anyway, it's such a privilege to be here. It genuinely is. And I do beg to move that the committee has approved the Russia Sanctions EU Exit Number 4 Regulations 2024. These amend the Russia Sanctions EU Exit Regulations 2019. So to provide some explanation to the committee, this instrument was laid on the 5th of September 2024. That was under powers in the Sanctions and Anti-Money Laundering Act 2018. The measures in this instrument entered into force on the 6th of September as a made affirmative measure. In recent years, the UK has transformed its use of sanctions. We've deployed sanctions in an innovative and impactful way, including in our response to Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine. That includes our prohibitions on the legal sector. We take a rigorous approach that's carefully targeted to deter and disrupt malign behaviour and to demonstrate our defence of international norms. Chair, in June 2023, a prohibition on legal advisory services, Regulation 54D, was introduced to prevent UK lawyers from providing their services to those seeking to continue trading with Russia in goods or services that the UK had sanctioned. This was a unique prohibition. It sought to prevent access to our world-renowned legal services market while retaining and upholding the UK values of access to justice and representational advice. Once introduced, however, it became clear that the sanction had the unintended effect of preventing the legitimate provision of advice on non-UK sanctions compliance. For instance, it had an impact on advising companies on compliance with US or EU sanctions on Russia. A general licence was therefore rapidly implemented in August 2023 as a temporary fix to enable UK lawyers to continue to provide this advice. This instrument provides the permanent solution and clarifies within legislation the kinds of legal advice the government intends UK lawyers to be able to provide. For example, it ensures that advice can be given on compliance with non-UK sanctions, on Russian counter-sanctions and global criminal law. Receiving this advice is paramount for the functioning of an effective international sanctions response to Russia. Whilst amending this legislation, a full and thorough review was undertaken, including engaging with esteemed stakeholders in the legal and financial sectors. This engagement has assured us that this amendment will ensure greater clarity for the sector and will continue to support our robust and unwavering commitment to cutting off access to our world-leading legal sector from those wanting to advance the interests of Russia. This review also highlighted a number of other areas for improvement, which have been reflected in the instrument. That includes amending Regulation 54D to align more closely with the way the existing circumvention regimes work, creating greater parity between the legal advisory services that can be provided to a UK person and a non-UK person. The amendment clarifies expressly that Regulation 54D covers activity outside the UK, meaning that it more clearly operates alongside the existing circumvention regulations, avoiding overlapping offences. We've also worked with the sector to ensure the language in the instrument is as clear as possible regarding the provision of their services. By ensuring legal advice can continue to be provided for the purposes of non-UK sanctions compliance, we enhance the effectiveness of the sanctions the UK and our allies have placed on Russia and intensify the pressure on Putin. As well as ensuring that advice can be given on compliance with non-UK sanctions and on Russian counter-sanctions, we have also ensured that advice can continue to be provided on compliance with global criminal law. By protecting the fundamental right to legal representation, we continue to distinguish ourselves from Putin's oppressive regime. Finally, some clarifications have been made to ensure that Regulation 54D does not capture services in connection with the management of claims under a contract of insurance or reinsurance. This government is committed to enforcement, and it's right that we ensure that we have the necessary powers, tools and capacity to implement and enforce our sanctions regimes effectively. That's why, on the 10th of October, the new government launched the Office for Trade Sanctions Implementation, or OTSI, with enhanced civil enforcement powers to maximise the impact of the UK's trade sanctions against Russia. These powers include the ability to issue civil monetary penalties for breaches and to make details of breaches public. There are also new reporting requirements on sectors well positioned to find evidence of trade sanctions breaches. Chair, to conclude, sanctions continue to play an important part in the UK's response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The amendments introduced by this instrument strengthen our commitment to an effective sanctions regime by making the regulations clearer and therefore more effective. This will continue to deter and disrupt Russia's aggression towards Ukraine. I therefore commend the regulations to the committee.
The question is that the committee has considered the Russia Sanctions EU Exit Amendment number 4 Regulations 2024. Call the opposition spokesperson, Alicia Kurz.
Thank you ever so much. It's a pleasure to serve once again under your chairmanship. And can I thank the Minister? I'm grateful for her remarks. I shall keep my own brief because the Conservative Party supports these regulations and the technical and clarificatory amendments they seek to make to the existing Russia sanctions regime. I'm sure the committee is well aware that asset freezes are a cornerstone of our sanctions regime, and in particular our Russia sanctions regime. The Conservative government rightly targeted oligarchs and the circle of people closest to the Kremlin with asset freezes, stopping their significant and valuable assets being sent back to Russia and ultimately undermining Putin's ability to prosecute his barbaric, renewed illegal invasion of Ukraine. I recognise and I'm grateful also to the Minister for recognising that it was an innovative approach that the UK took and that we were indeed the first country to put in place such a sanctions regime with the new freedoms we had to be able to pursue them. According to the Office of Financial Sanctions Implementation, around £20 billion worth of assets have been frozen since February 2022 following the renewed illegal invasion. Regulation of legal advisory services is a crucial buttress for ensuring those asset freezes work and that the system in general is watertight. It is right that we should continue to ensure our sanctions package and accompanying regulations, including those regarding legal advisory services, are as effective as possible. But it's also important that the guidance for the legal profession is as clear as possible and that these changes are effectively communicated. It does continue to be an issue, however, that some parts of the legal profession seek to provide opportunities to support those who are sanctioned, and therefore we must be clear so we can prosecute those who breach them. The government must use the Russia sanctions regime to its fullest extent because we must constrain Putin's war machine, targeting not just individuals, but also entities and businesses helping to fuel it. I was pleased that we established OFSI. It is an absolutely vital part of this process, but it is of concern that OFSI is yet to fine any individual or entity for sanctions evasion. Whilst I understand the complexities in issuing fines, I'd be grateful if the Minister can expand on how the government intends to ensure those who breach our sanctions face the proper consequences and what scrutiny is being placed on OFSI, because there is a gap within the way in which Parliament can scrutinise, and of course this is an individual body. The Minister will know the Conservative government sanctioned a number of companies in China who have been feeding supplies to Russia's military-industrial complex. We should be targeting entities actively helping to pop up Putin's war wherever they are in the world. And I am concerned that we have yet to see a statement from the Foreign Office following recent significant reports about Chinese support to Russia and indeed even more recent reports that over half of all weapons being used against Ukraine are coming from North Korea, both of which I have raised formally with the Foreign Office. Finally, the Conservative government was a leading advocate for immobilised Russian assets being used to support Ukraine and for ensuring the Russian state pays for the destruction it has caused. We must be very clear when we look back in history that this was Putin's war, his renewed illegal invasion. He is responsible and he must lose. We are talking here about a significant sum of money, and it is vital that the Labour government continues that work and really pushes our allies to coalesce around the most ambitious support solution to achieve those important aims, because this money must not just help with the defence of Ukraine, but also the rebuilding of Ukraine and the delivery of compensation to all those who have lost so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So, motion's open now for debate, up to an hour and a half. Callum Miller.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to serve under your chair. Thanks to the Minister for the presentation. Liberal Democrats strongly support a robust sanctions regime against Russia to counter the illegal invasion of Ukraine. And indeed, we would support the government work to go further in actions in this area, specifically to start now seizing Russian assets in the UK so that they can be redirected towards Ukraine, even if our allies might waver in the implementation of that internationally agreed approach. So we support the proposals today, and we support a set of regulations that are effective and allow British professional services firms to compete fairly on the international stage. However, I'd welcome reassurance from the Minister. All legal advice of this type can aid compliance of UK and other firms, can also aid them in navigating a system. So can the Minister please provide assurance that the effect of these amendments will indeed be to aid compliance with this regime and stop resources flowing to and from Russia, and not in any way enable clients to navigate the system in such a way that they might evade the sanctions regime when it is so important to our policies towards Russia.
Thank you very much, and apologies if I get the procedure wrong. This is the first time I've done this, but I do align myself with the comments of my honourable friend? No, just honourable. One day. It's a quick question to the Minister in terms of the consultation. So I do appreciate that there is no formal consultation required, but the paper does say that there has been informal consultation with stakeholders. I'd just be interested if the Minister could tell us who those stakeholders are.
Excellent. Well, I'm very grateful, Mr Betts, for the really helpful interventions that we've just had during this discussion. I'm particularly grateful to the Honourable Lady for her remarks in support of this SI, and also the Honourable Gentleman as well, and also for the question of clarification around consultation. I will come on to all of those in a moment. It's very clear that from the new UK government side, we're absolutely determined to use every mechanism we can to ensure that UK sanctions will disrupt Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine and the pursuit of its illegal war against Ukraine. We are determined to continuously refine our sanctions measures so that we're applying effective pressure on Russia, both domestically and internationally as well. OTSI was rightly mentioned by the Honourable Lady. It is working at pace. And we're really determined to ensure that it's effective. Indeed, although we didn't talk about it in this debate, and I won't go into it in detail, she will have seen that the Prime Minister himself has been very active on these questions of ensuring compliance with sanctions regimes, and that indeed that was a core element of what he set out of the European political community as well when that took place over the summer. So this really is a priority for the UK, both domestically in terms of our own activities, ensuring our own regime is watertight, but also multilaterally as well, and working with our partners towards that aim of disrupting Putin's war effort. Of course, the work doesn't stop here. As I said, this is a continuous process of renewal to make sure that we have this right and to make it harder for entities to circumvent sanctions. And in response to the question posed by the Honourable Gentleman, my county colleague, absolutely these measures are precisely intended to ensure compliance. That is the entire point, in fact, for them being laid, that if you have a lack of clarity, if you have overlapping legal regimes, that's the kind of situation where you could see loopholes being exploited. Instead, this SI is clarifying the situation so that it can work effectively and so that there is compliance. And on the point around consultation, that was with those engaged in the financial sectors, the legal sectors as well, but of course working very hard to make sure above all that this would be an effective regime. You know, I strongly am of the view that those working in those sectors want to make sure there's legal clarity, but also that the UK sanctions regime is held to, and we need to make sure, of course, that's the case across the board, you know, as I was just saying to the other member on the opposite side. So this SI does ensure that, and as I say, that consultation was with key figures in those industries who are engaged on these matters. Now, we obviously continue committed to making sure our use of sanctions is modern and effective and joined up with other countries, although our regimes are subtly different, reflecting in this case, for example, the different legal systems that we have between the UK and the EU and US. But we want to make sure that we're keeping that pressure on Russia. And the Honourable Lady raised the issue of China. Actually, the Foreign Secretary has spoken quite a lot about the need for a joined-up UK approach to China generally. That's a priority for the new government to make progress on that when we haven't had a coherent, we would say, approach previously. We think we need to have one. But we're very clear that any evidence of Chinese companies providing military support to Russia would be damaging to China's international reputation, given its strong avowed position on not being involved in the conflict. And we won't hesitate to take action against anyone who supplies and funds Putin's war machine. We're very clear on that.
Would you give way on that point? I thank you for giving way on that point. The Foreign Secretary is, of course, in China this week. So I would hope that he can reassure us when he returns next week that he has raised this directly with his Chinese counterparts during this visit, because it would be unacceptable for him not to, given that it has been more than 2 months now since that concrete evidence came out proving that China was enabling Russia in this way. And equally on North Korea, we do have an ambassador here in London who should be being called in to answer questions on how over half of those weapons that are maiming and murdering Ukrainians are coming from North Korea. So can she show me that the Foreign Secretary will be able to confirm that when he returns next week, that he has raised this very specific and deeply concerning issue with him directly?
Minister.
Well, the new Foreign Secretary is absolutely committed to ensuring that the House is updated on all aspects of his activities. So I know that she has seen that thus far, that actually he's been an extremely responsive Foreign Secretary, and I'm sure that will be the case on these issues, as on all other ones indeed, where he's been incredibly active. His feet have barely touched the ground, and he's yet been in the Commons quite a bit, actually, to make sure that the Commons remain updated. Yeah, sure.
My question was not about whether he will update the House, it's on whether or not he will raise this issue directly in Beijing, because he has the direct opportunity to put to Wang Yi or indeed to Xi Jinping that they should not be providing these weapons to Russia. And so the reassurance that he has that on his agenda to raise while he is there. And of course, I would then expect him to update the House, but the issue is what he does while he's there this week.
Minister.
I mean, I think the Foreign Secretary has been very clear indeed about his role and his leadership in relation to the conflict in Ukraine. There's no question about that. He's been very clear indeed on it. However, surely she would understand, and obviously she has followed these issues for some time, that the precise content of discussions between global leaders is not something that I, as a minister, would be seeking to preempt, and I wouldn't have expected to do so in opposition either. Clearly, that is something that is determined by those global leaders themselves. So, just to conclude, if I may, Mr. Betts, I once again want to thank members within this chamber for the very insightful contributions. It's been a brief debate, but for those for whom this is their first experience of such a committee, I hope you will see many more. I'm sure you will enjoy every single one, and I'm really grateful for the continued cross-party support for having strong, impactful, effective sanctions in relation to Russia's war efforts. Thank you, Mr. Betts.
Well, I won't ask members if they're enjoying it anyway. That won't be the right question to ask. Right. The question is that the committee has considered the Russia Sanctions EU Exit Amendment number 4 Regulations 2024. Does many of that opinion say aye? Aye. Contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. That brings us to the end of business.